5, and I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, who's going to walk you through sort of a high-level look at your financial statements. These are the same numbers that you see in the actual financial statement packets that you have. So she's going to talk us through those. Thanks, Jamie.
Hi, everyone. So the first statement that we're going to look at is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in that position. So this is a formal title for your profit and loss statement. So what we're going to start off with is the revenues line. So in 2021, you had about $327,000 administrative and application fees. So this is down about $97,000 from the prior year. And really this is just dependent on the number of applications that are in process, the size of those applications. It really fluctuates year to year. So in 2020, you had 5 significantly large, high projects that had application fees, and there were really only 3 in the current year that made up the bulk of the $327,000. There was, one of the application fees was $146,000. So that's, just about half the balance right there. So this line is really subject to fluctuations on what projects are in process during the year. If we move down, interest income is very consistent year over year. That line, payments in lieu of tax, so that used to be where you would take your percentage of the pilot payments that you took in and then paid out, and that program was required to end in 2020, so that's why there was only a tiny little bit for 2020, and there is no income in 2021. We move down a little bit further, there's a line for other revenues, and that's about $172,000 in comparison to $45,000 in the prior year. So that increase is primarily driven by $155,000 of an adjustment that was management calculated to adjust the loan reserve. So what that is management determines the collectability of all of the loans that have been lent out and receivable balance. And in 2020, this allowance was much higher given the landscape of COVID, so many uncertainties, a number of the COVID loans that were given out. And based on the analysis that was conducted this year, that allowance or reserve was allowed to come down. So it ended up increasing revenue by about $155,000. So that's one of a one-time adjustment. It's not something you typically see year to year, but it's just recouping the expense that was incurred in the prior year based on an estimate. So Kevin puts together and analyzes each loan line by line and really the circumstances and facts around those loans. So it's pretty robust. And the last line here is federal funds loan repayment. So that's about $150,000 in comparison to $168,000 in the prior year. It's really just a slight reduction of $18,000. And that's just driven by the fact that in the prior year, there were 2 final payments that were made on some of the Operation Oswego County loans, and those loans were paid off. So the actual number of loans is less this year. So overall, total revenues was about $803,000 in comparison to $818,000, so pretty consistent with the prior year. Are there any questions on the revenues?
Anybody on the board have any questions for Jamie on the revenue side? Thank you, Jamie. I think we can continue.
Okay, we're going to move on down to expenditures. So we just grouped the expenditures in 3 main categories here. So you'll see that administration expenses were about $501,000 this year. They're down about $105,000 from the prior year. This is driven by about $107,000 drop in professional fees that were incurred in 2020. So these professional fees were for some of the studies that were done on the industrial park, the Fulton Nestle site, and actually some of those fees you did recoup from reimbursements from your partners, and those are up in the other revenue line as well. But the majority of those studies and expenses took place in 2020, so we see a drop in those expenses. So they were a little bit skewed in the prior year. If we move down to other expenses, you'll see a significant drop. So in 2021, there were only $13,000 of other expenses versus $626,000 in the prior year. So in the prior year, there were a number of one-time items. So there was about $262,000 of expenses for that loan loss reserve that I mentioned, that allowance that was created and established based on the COVID landscape and some uncertainties. And some of that was recouped this year. And there was also a $300,000 manufacturing incentive grant that was given out. So again, another one-time item that really drove up expenses in the prior year. And if we move down to the last line, loan issuance expense, That's about $103,000 this year versus $338,000 in the prior year. This again is driven entirely by the number of loans that are given out and the dollar value of those loans. So in 2020, there were only 3 loans that were issued, but one of those loans was $300,000. Whereas in 2021, there were 5 loans issued, but they were significantly smaller. There were 3 $25,000 loans, a $35,000 loan. So that one large loan really drove up the loan expense in the prior year. Overall, we end with about $617,000 of expenses, and we end the year with a change in net position or net income of about $186,000, so a positive year for the organization. So are there any questions on the profit and loss or the expenses?
Anyone have any questions? Tim, any questions from you?
No, thank you. That's an excellent summary.
So you flip with me to the next page, page 6. We're going to talk about the statement of net position. So this is the formal title for your balance sheet or your assets and liabilities. We'll start with assets. So cash for the year was about $10.6 million. So it's actually down about $354,000 this year. So that's driven by 2 main items. So one, the IDA did purchase property this year for about $1 million. And the Fulton manufacturing site was about $80,000, and then some additional acres for the industrial park, about $1.1 million there. So that was a direct payment of cash, so reduced the cash balance. And it was actually offset by, payments that you receive on loans for the loans receivable. So if we move on to loans receivable, so they were about $7.4 million in 2021. So that's down about $630,000 this year. So what this basically means is that there were about $430,000 in new loans given out, but there was about $1.2 million in payments that were received. So the loans that you're giving out are less than the payments that you're taking in. And there was also that change in the reserve for loan loss or the allowance for doubtful accounts that was reduced by about $155,000. So there's just less loans given out. You're seeing higher payments coming through. So normal activity there. And so that $1.2 million of payments is reflected in the cash fluctuation as well. The next line is project assets. So about $1.9 million in project assets this year. So that's up about $1.2 million. And again, that was due to the purchase of the Onondaga County Industrial Park acres. So it was about a $1.1 million purchase. And then the Fulton manufacturing site was about $80,000. So significant increase of fixed assets there. So overall, we end up with total assets of just shy of $20 million. So that's up about $200,000 from the prior year. So that fixed asset purchase really offset the reduction in loans and cash that took place. Any questions on the assets?
Not a question, just a clarification. Jamie, you misspoke when you said purchase of the Onondaga County Industrial Park.
Oh, sorry. I'm
that's
sorry,
all right.
Oswego County.
Since we're recording this, we just didn't want
Yeah,
a rumor started
I
that
have this acronym written in, and I was just going right through. Thank you for catching that.
No problem.
We didn't want a big announcement in the Post Standard tomorrow.
Oh gosh, no.
Jamie, this is Kevin L. Before you continue, I think, did Haley or Peter join the call from Omni Navitas? Okay, all right, please continue, Jamie.
Sure. So we'll move on down to liabilities here. So we just have them grouped in other liabilities, which is really so $83,000 in the current year versus $25,000 in the prior year. We'll start with the prior year amount. That was an amount that was payable for the EDF, $25,000 based on a calculation of your cash balance at the end of the year. So it was a one-time payment that was made. In the current year, this is also a bit of an unusual amount. So it's just the timing of a pilot that was received. So money to pay a pilot was received prior to July 31st, and it wasn't actually remitted until August. So it's held as a liability to the IDA, and then it's paid out as cash afterwards. So sometimes that just happens as a timing difference at the end of the year. We see it every now and then. So it's just held as a liability. And then your loan payable is $574,000 this year. Slight increase there, no significant changes. And then the main line item here is your deferred inflows of resources. So that's another word for your deferred revenue. So loan money that's being held and is released as it's earned. So that's about $1.4 million. This year it's down about $47,000. So that change is attributable to one of the journal entries that Christina mentioned earlier. It is just you've earned more revenue in the current year based on loan payments that have come in. So overall, we have total net position of about $17.9 million. So that is up about $186,000, as I mentioned on the previous page, your net income for the year. The net position categories that you see here are the net investment in capital assets. That's the reserve for the project assets that we mentioned above for your purchases. Your reserved cash is specific to loans receivable, and so you have about $3.3 million in unreserved or available net position. Any question on the balance sheet?
Anyone have any questions for Jamie? Tim, are you good?
We're trained.
Okay. All right, Jamie.
We can flip to slide 7. This is just a couple of recommendations and opportunities for strengthening internal controls that we have that we usually discuss annually. So the first item on the list is oversight and segregation of duties. So this is a repeat of a prior year finding that we've discussed, for the past several years, and it's really just due to the limited number of staffing available that's on a day-to-day basis. Given the small organizational size, this is just a comment that we sort of have to make, and especially given upcoming retirements, it does present an opportunity where errors or misstatements can occur. So we just like to encourage segregation where available, any type of oversight and as it's prudent. Christina, is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think that, this is something we've talked about before, and I think COVID derailed some of the plans to implement this with, people not being in the office, not being able to, sort of be in the same place at the same time, but it is really important, and I think, as Jamie mentioned, this year is a critical year to get this implemented.
Are there any questions or comments before we move on to the next opportunity?
Yeah, this is Gary, Christina, Jamie. I know we've talked about this before, but like you said, with COVID and stuff, we've kind of been, I don't want to say winging it a little bit, but we've been working with staff and everything to try to make sure everything was taken care of and we were fulfilling our duties. But could you send a letter basically detailing how we can strengthen our internal controls, specifically?
So we will be issuing a letter with the financial statements that management has already seen, and I think is included in your packet.
Oh, it is? Okay. All right.
Yeah, the details, our recommendation in terms of the physical, implementation of that. Because of our independence, I can't say, well, do this or do that, but it is something that we've talked about with management, and we're open to talking about further. If you want to run some ideas by us or talk to us about details, we're absolutely open to that.
Yeah, okay, as long as,
The management letter is the one that starts to board of directors, not to agency members, so, and it's on the back are the comments, Schedule A. But the front of the letter starts off to board of directors.
okay. All right, so we can review this letter, then you're open for discussion on how we can work to strengthen our internal controls a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
The next bullet that we have on here is just review of debtors' financial information. This is a comment that I think we talked about maybe a couple of years ago, but it's really just, so as part of the process of issuing loans out, you're required to review their financial information annually. So in our review of that, as part of the audit, we found that about 46% of the loans were missing information. And then from the remaining ones that information was available, 30 of those loans were from 2018, and another 13, the latest information available was from 2017. So we just want to encourage and recommend to really do your best to obtain the latest financial information for each of your debtors. We know, given the landscape and all of the like you mentioned, winging it with COVID, that has been a challenge. So just trying to keep on trying to obtain that information any way possible.
Okay. Thank you very much on that.
Christina, anything you'd like to add there? Nope, that's perfect, thank you. Okay. We can turn to slide 8, which is just our last slide for relevant accounting and auditing updates. So the main one you'll see here is leases, that's GASB statement 87. So I think we've talked about this for years at this point. It was delayed a little bit due to COVID. So what we're just asking is to keep track of any leases. It's going to require capitalizing any operating leases. So we're just really asking everyone to keep track of any leases that you may have. And those will be put on the books. And it's leases that are longer than 12 months. So I think you just have one.
Is this strictly real estate leases, or can this be, like a equipment lease or something along those lines? Is that?
Yeah, it's any lease that was previously an operating lease that would then it'll be treated like a capital lease.
Jamie, what?
On the books.
This is Kevin. Does the IDA have any leases? Because it doesn't own any office equipment or some of the typical.
One that I thought that there was one that you take in the revenue for, but I don't think you actually have any equipment lease. You don't have any equipment leases.
No.
I don't think so. Now that I'm going through them in my head, not that I can think of. Is there any that you're thinking of, Kevin?
No, not on the IDA side.
Well,
All
what
our
I'm thinking
stuff
of is
straight leases with the businesses and stuff.
No, but what I'm thinking of is we've gone, instead of loaning money out for equipment to some of these businesses as our financial assistance, we're leasing the refrigeration equipment and whatnot to K&N and different scenarios like that, where we can use a lease and not a loan. This is a different situation.
The impact is when you're the lessee.
Okay.
Okay.
So in your example, like K&N's would need to pay attention to this rule, so they would book our lease appropriately in that kind of made up example.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it says down here, and the lessor is required to recognize the lease receivable as deferred inflow of resources. So is that different than the way we're handling this now, or because we're the lessor in this situation?
Yeah, it is.
So I guess that's where I'm going with this. So there's two sides to every accounting coin. So we've got to have our books in order this is next year, not this current fiscal year that we're in, but the one following, right?
Correct. So I think we should get a good understanding of what leases there are, and then look at those agreements and see if they meet the criteria.
Okay.
So that's probably the best place for us to start. Kevin, does that sound good?
Yeah, I think if we recognize those leases, we'll have to look at recognizing a liability as a payable to the taxing authorities. This is fairly complex. I don't think we should talk about it now at this meeting. But, because the leases aren't to our benefit. When we have a straight lease transaction with a pilot, it's not our money.
That's not what I'm talking
about.
about. That's not what I'm talking about.
I don't think that's what we're talking
You're
about.
talking about
Okay.
equipment.
I'm talking about leasing equipment.
Equipment
Alright.
lease.
So if a company,
financing.
if we finance a piece of machinery
Yeah.
for a company and
From the
we
pilot
set it up as a
EDF.
lease, we use it from the pilot EDF fund. It's not a pilot per
Right.
se. It's money that came from the EDF fund. Then we're technically we're technically taking ownership of that equipment
Right.
and leasing it back to the said company, right? And I don't know if they're all we've got these set up as dollar buyouts or what the situation
Yeah.
would be, but however it is, that's what,
It's
those
only-
are the situations we're talking
It's
about.
only a handful of those. I mean, really.
Well,
We do
that's-
one or two a year,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, so we can evaluate those over the next year to be able to speak to that a little bit more clearly in preparation for 2023's year end.
So you just need to see the language of the lease.
Did you hear that, Christina or Jamie?
Yeah, we'll be looking at each of the language in the leases and looking at the conditions and see if they meet the criteria.
They're probably all the same.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
But I can pull one up and send it off to Jamie and Christine.
Okay, that's great. And then we'll just be looking at the terms. So it has to be more than 1 year in order to be evaluated like that. So we'll want to know what ones are out there and what the terms on them are.
Okay, thank you very much. You good, Nick?
Good, yeah.
Kevin?
Yep.
All right.
That was all that we had, unless you have any other questions or comments for us.
Anybody on the board, Tim, anybody have any questions or comments or anything for Jamie and Christina? Well, I guess not. I think we're all set.
Okay, great. Well, if anything comes up, you guys know how to reach us. Thank you so much. And again, everyone was a pleasure to work with. So thank you, and thank you to the management team.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time in the audit.
Jamie, and Christina, when will we be receiving the final draft of the audit with the supplemental statement? 'Cause
Are they?
we gotta put that on the
accepted today?
website.
Is it the board that intends to accept everything today?
Yes,
Yeah, well, I'm assuming
I
we're going
would
to approve the
think
audit,
so,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Then we can get them out to you later this week. We definitely can get you the PDF. Do you know how many hard copies you need, or can you email me that?
In terms of hard copies, we only need about 5 hard copies.
Okay.
Electronic copy is what we really use.
Okay. We will get to work on that after we collect a little bit of information from you. So we'll be certainly getting in touch in the next few hours.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Okay, do you want to stay on the line while we act on this, please? And that way you'll know whether it passed or not? We have to make a motion to accept the audit report.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Morris Sorbello, seconded by Nick Canale on the audit report. And the audit from Grossman St. Amour. Is there any comments, discussions, or questions on the report that was given by Jamie and Christina? Tim, you can hear us, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Any questions on your behalf?
No, thank you. That was a good presentation.
Okay, thanks, Tim. All right, so there being no questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's carried. So thank you very much, Jamie and Christina. And you and Mike can get together and get the final report together.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Haley or Peter, are you on the phone?
Yep, this is Peter. Hey, everyone.
Hi, Peter.
And this is Haley. Hi, everyone.
Are we gonna move on to number 5?
Yeah.
Next.
Peter, Haley.
Yeah. I'm gonna open this up a little bit.
Peter and Haley, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. This is Gary Toth. So we're going to number 5 right now, Omni Richland, the North Solar LLC. So Kevin, you taking the lead on that?
Yeah, I'll just give a brief overview for the board and then turn it over to Peter and Haley. So first of all, this is another solar project like we've seen many of. We've worked with Omni Navitas in the past on a number of projects. So we're familiar with each other, they're familiar with the process, etc. It's a 5 megawatt AC solar array in the town of Richland, kind of south of the village of Pulaski on County Route 28. It's a 203 acre parcel. This site will take up about 29, just over 29 acres. So of course the exemption that we're considering will only apply to the acreage of the solar farm itself. once the property description is finalized, which I think it is at this point. It's about close to a $6.8 million project. And Omni Navitas is the company's applying for this pilot under our solar pilot policy, so a 20-year, 2% escalator and $5,000 per megawatt. It's basically the deal. And they're familiar with that program from past arrangements. So that's my overview. Any questions from the board on that before I turn it over to the company folks? All right, Peter or Haley, you want to give us some additional information or maybe some updates on where you guys are, your timeline going forward, etc.?
Yeah, and Kevin, thanks for the introduction, and appreciate you having us on the agenda this morning. So, yeah, the only thing I would add, similar to the other couple projects we've had in the town of Richland, we've gone through the site plan approval and special use permit, as well as the seeker process with the planning board there. So, we have all of our, required approvals, let's call them, from the town of Richland. We've also gone through the Caesar and interconnection process with National Grid. So we have our study results and, our technically approval to interconnect the project to the grid. So, obviously we're here today looking for a pilot through the IDA, and I think just the outside timeline, we're kind of looking to get all of our ducks in a row throughout the rest of this year and early next year, and ideally start construction on this project, when the weather breaks next spring. So I'm happy to answer any questions or comments, but that's kind of a brief overview on where we're at and where we're looking to go moving forward with the project.
Peter, this is Gary Toth. You've met and you have everything pretty much set up with the town of Richland on this project, you said?
That's correct, yes. We received our negative declaration on seeker, which I'm happy to provide, back in August, and then we got our site plan approval and special use permit in September, I think it was, and I'm happy to provide those resolution documents if need be.
Yeah, I believe I have them. So.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, as far as decommissioning, has that been settled with the town of Richland too? Some sort of bond or agreement with the town on eventual decommissioning of the site?
Yep, so we submitted a decommissioning plan, and then, as usual, we'll be posting and setting up a bond prior to pulling a building permit and starting construction.
Okay. And the acreage that, is it leased or did you purchase the property?
It's going to be leased.
It's gonna be leased? Okay, and how many acres are you leasing?
It's approximately 29 acres that we'll be leasing, which is what the project
So-
makes up.
Okay, so it's just the footprint of the solar farm?
Correct, yep.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions for Peter or Haley?
2 megawatts? 5
5 megawatt.
Those are big.
It's 5 megawatt, right, Peter?
Yeah, we're trying to
Yeah.
run some small
Okay.
ones.
Kevin, there's two projects potentially, right? One on each side of the road. Is this the same?
No, this is new.
No, this is a
Completely
standalone
different?
project, yeah.
Okay.
Omni has, there's a north-south pair of projects that are fully approved that I think we're in the closing phase of that
Yeah.
Omni has. But this is a standalone, even though north,
Yeah,
well,
this
from what
is
Peter
a-
told me, even though north is in the name, there's no south coming.
Gotcha.
Right, Peter?
Oh, no, yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is a separate project, and you are correct. This is just gonna be a standalone project. We're not gonna follow behind with south.
This is the Atkinson property?
So, no, Nicholson.
This is actually Nicholson, yeah.
Nicholson.
Atkinson are ones next door that we, that are fully approved, like you said, Kevin, and we have going as well.
Great, thank you.
That was on Route 41, wasn't
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
County Route
But
41,
nearby,
yeah.
yeah. That's a good point there. Are they adjoining parcels? Oh, I didn't look at the property map that closely, or they're just?
Yeah, they actually are. They're actually split by the transmission lines that we'll be connecting to.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
And I'll I'll add for the board's information, of course, the next stage would be to hold a public hearing, and since this is technically a deviation from our overall UTEP, we'd issue deviation letters. The Pulaski Central School District has been active and successful in negotiating the term of the pilot agreements with the company, so it could be that they will bring that up and discuss a 15-year term with Omni instead of a 20-year term. But at the moment, we're moving forward with a 20-year per our policy, pending any review from the taxing authorities.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
How does that work then, Kevin, if we agree to a 20-year?
Well, we're not approving it now. We're just approving that at public hearing at this meeting.
Well, I mean, we, under general municipal law, we have the authority to approve a deviation, notwithstanding position of one of the taxing authorities. So, for instance, if the school district wanted 15, but we're comfortable with approving 20, and we approve 20, it's going to be 20.
Okay.
So,
I guess my point is we're having a public hearing, and the public hearing is going to address 20, right?
Right.
And so we're going to be, I suppose, going to 15 is going in a more favorable aspect to any of the municipalities, but that maybe not.
I mean, this has happened before. Every time in the Pulaski School District, there's been quite a few projects up there that we go into the public hearing stating it's a 20-year pilot. We come out with an agreement with the
What are the
developer
other
that it's a
two?
15-year pilot.
What were the other two approved at? 15?
Oh, there's been a number in the Pulaski School
No,
District.
no, the other
The
two.
other two
Omni
for
ones.
Omni.
Yeah, 15 for sure.
Yeah,
I
okay.
didn't know
Yeah.
that. We were,
I don't remember
We got
anything
them
in the Richland area that wasn't 15. Even the one that we didn't ultimately do, that Richland won, that still remained 15, even though they dropped doing a pilot.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Somehow I missed
I didn't
that,
catch that either.
that we've been approving them at 15.
Only based on the input from the public.
No, I
hearing,
understand
the
that. No,
deviation
yeah,
letter.
no,
Our
I
policy's
understand how we
still
get there, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying that somehow I'm surprised. I don't remember approving and discussing that it was, these were brought back down to 15 from 20.
We have each time, absolutely. They've been on the cost benefit.
So I missed it,
and-
because that's our
I don't know,
policy.
but
So
Okay.
it's been
deviation.
discussed.
All right, so I just missed, okay.
We're deviating from the deviation.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, any other discussion? From the board, Tim, any questions?
If I could, the only thing I would remind the administrative side of things is when those informational memos go out, if we could include that legislator whose district it in as well, I think that is part of our process, just reminding.
We do that.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Okay, if there's no other discussions, I guess we'll, I'll take a motion, excuse me, on the initial resolution on the Omni Solar, North Solar LLC.
Gary, I'd like to comment on your motion, that just to be clear with everyone, that the initial resolution states nothing about the terms of the pilot, the years, the amount. All it does is it determines that this is a qualified project and that it authorizes the IDA to set up a public hearing. So just to be clear on what we're approving
Okay.
today, we're not discussing. We discussed, but we're not approving the term of the pilot agreement.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Kim. All right, motion by Lynn Schick, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Barry Trimble, is there any further discussions or questions? All those in favor of the initial resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion is carried. Okay, Peter, Haley, thank you very much, and you're welcome to stay on the line, or if you have further business to attend to, thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. We'll see
Thanks,
you
everyone.
next month.
Take care.
Bye.
I do have, I have a question on the solar, when they get bought out, change. Now, this company is putting the bond up, so it's coming out of that company. When someone else buys it, what happens to that bond?
Generally, it's either assumed or a new bond needs to be posted by the new company. I'm not sure that we've, I mean, we're coming up to that with, I think, in number 7, but I don't know that we've had that situation presented
I'm just
yet.
wondering if it got lost, you know, if there's a chance it could easily get lost, the bond. In other words, the company that's
Yes.
selling just, you know, wipes out their
Right.
bond and we don't pick up the fact that the company buying has to pay the bond or submit, you know, do the bond.
Still required in the terms of the agreement, so they'd have to obtain more.
It is, but yeah, I mean, to your point, you can say that, but if they don't physically do it, or nobody checks them on it, then
Right.
where, how do we verify?
I mean, that's the
it?
whole idea of why we've been so adamant of a bond, so that the municipality's not left holding the bag when the company leaves.
Mhm.
Is that something we should be asking for on our end too, Kevin, or is that the responsibility of the municipality?
Well, I think because we've incorporated into our policy, it's good to have that redundancy. I mean, the local community should, but a lot of times, there's no requirement that the company go back to the local community and say, hey, we're transferring the project. There is a requirement on this board, so as part of our UTEP,
I think it's our responsibility.
I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that follows through.
Yeah, this is Tim. I think we've definitely talked about this in light of all these transactions. In fact, I was jokingly going to ask these guys, you know, or what time, what date, and what name are they going to be selling it to? But I think that I know we've talked about this in this board meeting. That should absolutely be part of our process. And if it isn't, we need to make sure it is. Because you're right, there's no, and we talked about this, because there's no required public hearing for transaction, right, for selling this. And so the boards very well likely have no idea that they've changed names. We are the only gatekeeper of that. So I think we have to have that as part of our responsibility.
Do we notify the taxing authorities about a change
We do.
prior to doing it or after
Well,
the fact?
generally, it's after the fact in this context. For instance, this Howland Solar, which is number 7, not to necessarily jump, but it's a good example. You know, we're going to be asked to consent to assigning that transaction from one company to the next. Once that's done, you make the approval here. We can put those conditions into it. But essentially, there's an assignment agreement, an assignment and assumption agreement, and then an amended and restated pilot agreement that's generated, and from that another 412A form, which is the form that goes to the taxing jurisdictions. That's filled out with the new company information. It's sent off so that the taxing authorities can change their records.
No, but no disrespect, but
Yeah.
you know, there's municipalities small. I'm not sure that they really, you know, get the gist of it. You know, they probably look at it and then just
Mexico,
Well-
case in point.
pass it. I think we're the keeper. I think it's
But in the case of Allen's Solar LLC, that legal entity still remains in place.
It does.
under
In that
different
case, yeah,
ownership.
you're right. In that case, they're purchasing the LLC. It's different members or different owners that will make up the membership interest of the LLC, but the LLC itself remains.
It's
well,
not-
you understand what my
I
point.
do. I
mean,
do.
and I guess that's just what I want to make sure
That's a
that
good point.
we're covered. Yeah,
Well, we're covered and also the municipality's covered.
right.
Mary, I had one question. I didn't want to get into anything, but I noticed we're going solar with a lot of stuff. Wind is pretty much a different subject. Yeah, I mean, mechanically or whatever, I just was curious. Sometimes you don't hear much about any wind projects,
We've had
which
zero.
primarily go into
We've had
water.
none.
Pardon?
We've had none, except for that one that was tried to encroach up in Redfield, that we weren't really involved in.
I was just curious. I mean, just curiosity. That infrastructure is just more adaptable on shorelines or whatever compared to these type of projects. It
Yeah.
just,
Don't know. Yeah.
So should there be boilerplate language in our resolution stating that whoever it is that's getting these needs to provide a bond?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea for these solar projects to incorporate an additional term related just to the, not, like maybe get into more detail in terms of the transfer or assignment and assumption of these agreements. Still need to get our approval, but they also will need to produce, proof of the transfer of decommissioning bond and some of these other requirements. So we can tailor these solar projects, the pilot agreements for these solar projects by adding a couple of different conditions. I like that idea.
So it would, the 4 requirements that we asked, decommissioning, escalate, the 2% escalator, that stuff would have to be reaffirmed by agreed to upon.
By the new company or whoever's taking over the.
Yeah, and in some cases, like you were saying, if it's just a paper thing, that bond might still be effective, but
Right.
if how would we know unless we
Yeah,
check?
and even then, I mean, I've got business clients who are purchasing membership interests in a piece of property, and the issues come up with insurance, right? So the new members want the old members to warrant certain things and representations that they've made, and the old members are saying, well, as soon as we sell it, we're out of here. We don't want to have to look over our shoulder. So the issue is, okay, what do? You get well, we'll just take over your insurance policy. You talk to the insurance company, and they said, no, you can't just take over the policy because there's different members, there's different concerns there, so you need a new brand new policy. And I think a lot
That's
of
what
that's
we're talking
probably
about
the
here.
same. And to Mike's point, even though the LLC may be remaining the same, mailing addresses will probably change, membership will change. So there's probably, there's likely a need to refile a 412A. It could be the same terms, they're just picking up where the old company left off, but as part of that, making sure that we've got the, just the right checks and balances, having the taxing jurisdictions receive that 412A and make the changes necessary is important. And I get to your point where a lot of these towns may not be as sophisticated, but the assessors all have an obligation. I mean, they're trained by the state. They're required to input data and all the rest of it. I mean, they do pay attention to these forms, and a lot of times I'll call them up ahead of time and just give them a heads up that this is coming.
I know a few of the assessors only work part-time.
Yeah,
And they might share like 3 or 4 communities,
they do.
and I know with ours, it's overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so things can slip, not because they're not doing their job, but they're so overwhelmed that things slip through it. So I think if we can take care of it on our end and make sure it's done, I think that would be very helpful.
Well, there's another aspect of this assignment and name flipping and everything too. I mean, there's legal costs incurred, which they pay for, but there's also staff time incurred, because we have to run around and chase our ass and everything on these things too, to get the 412A refiled again. We're doing everything twice or 3 times, and I think we were assessing some type of fee.
$250.
Yeah, but we gotta bump that up a little bit. That's like
Whatever
nothing.
fees.
Our
are
application
incurred.
fee is $500, but of course we get the.
Yeah, that's the application fee,
0.25%.
but that's in anticipation of getting the project fee. This we get nothing after it's done. Other than they have to pay the $500 per year admin fee that we have on all projects that have a pilot.
So would the 250 also would include Kevin's fee, or is that separate?
Yeah,
That's
no,
separate. Legal
separate.
is separate.
And that's always built to the company. And I thought we had a discussion about, having, whatever the balance of the pilot payment was, that would be the project cost, so that the IDA could charge.
Yeah, that
You
was
know,
talked
additional-
about a couple, 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of these companies, though, keep in mind, they're transferring even before the pilot payment starts. So then the question is, do you charge them the full amount, or is there a different amount that's?
That's the price of doing business.
No, and I'm not,
You know,
I'm not defending it.
I know you're not, I know you're not, I'm just saying is
I
that, you
agree
know,
with you.
that's the price of doing business, and if they're switching, one company to the next,
We shouldn't be, we should be made whole
right?
for any expenses, I mean, staff and legal fees, I feel.
Can I ask, so you're saying that we talked about it, and if this happened a year into the project, all right, and they were already starting to pay pilots, we're gonna assess, we discussed assessing a fee based on the remaining pilot payments.
Yeah.
If no pilot payments have been made, are you suggesting that instead of assessing the fee on the pilot payments, you reassess the fee on the overall scope of the project? So this would be, instead of on, pilot payments of $10,000 a year or $25,000 a year, it would be on the whole $6 million or whatever the project is?
I don't know that I'm suggesting either way, but I do think that the agency should be made whole for all of its time, and it's gonna be a heck of a lot more than $250.
Sure.
So whether it's a set amount, or it's a percentage based on what we've just been talking about, the overall project cost, or the life of the pilot payment, I mean, some formula that we can kind of present to the company is probably important. That happened in the last meeting.
So for information, Nick, this particular project we're talking about is about $6.8 million. Their total pilot payments, if approved, over 20 years is $607,000. So,
You're talking a
big
factor
10,
of 10.
10, yeah.
Right, so, if 1% of 6 million is the same as 10% of the pilot fee, so.
You can always cap it too, up to a certain amount.
Yeah,
A maximum, so that it wouldn't get ridiculous.
Why don't we just, Kevin and I will work out some type of formula to utilize going forward.
Sounds good.
And we'll present that at the next IDA meeting. Because it's gonna be more of these things.
yeah.
Yeah, but
And it could be a triple flip. I mean, some of them, they may change hands 3 or 4 or 5 times.
well, with Holland Solar, getting back to what Len originally discussed, I mean, are we gonna require, and I know this is kinda late in the game, but, I guess it isn't really, require Holland to present, the bond transfer or whatever to the new LLC, make sure that that's taken care of, because I think that's the big one right now.
Yep.
And also committed to the 2% escalator, everything that we required to give them the pilot.
Yeah, the short answer is yes, absolutely, all of it. But I don't think there's any misunderstanding on the part of the company that they're not going to be paying the exact same pilot with the 2% escalator, and they're only going to be the only portion of the property that's tax exempt is the footprint of the solar farm.
Right.
So all of that remains. The outstanding issue that I will nail down is how the decommissioning bond transfers over to this new company.
Okay.
Or whether they have to provide their own, or whether they would have
Right.
to provide, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, good discussion. Okay, now moving to number 6, the Civic Facilities Corporation. Mike, do you wanna take that?
Just for information purposes, I can let Tim Stahl talk about this because he moved to 2 resolutions. The county on the 14th of October approved a resolution to appoint the members of the Civic Facility Corporation, and that was resolution number 233 approved by the county. And then they also passed a resolution authorizing the refunding of the bonds by the Civic Facility Corporation up to $5 million. So, Tim, do you want to make any comments as to how you had to fight to get this through?
No, actually, I think it was more of a timing issue than anything. There was no concern from anyone that I spoke to about the purpose of either of those resolutions or the entity that is named. I think it was just more timing than anything. And obviously, we had having kind of resurrected this entity for this one purpose. The timing was kind of out of our hands as the IDA anyway. So I do want to thank all the work that Operations Duke County staff put in to get this done. And no, everything went smoothly. It was, I believe they were both unanimously.
Both.
I know it's one abstention, but other than that, unanimously. And my understanding is we are good to go as far as timing goes. And the county attorney, I think, has everything he needs. So unless there's something that anyone else knows of, I believe we were on path to get this taken care of.
Yeah, appreciate your help, Tim. That's it for that. If somebody has any further questions. You got a copy of the resolution with the numbers.
Okay, it's good.
This may end up closing in the next, next week or two, right?
I guess so, yeah.
There's a call right now, we have weekly calls on this, and I know that I was asked to submit, fees and things. I think the CFC's done the same through Operations Certain County IDA. Approvals that, the county legislatures made their approvals, so this is moving towards closing shortly.
Is there a need, or will there be a need for another civic facility formal meeting?
We got one
Now, end
scheduled.
of this
October 2020.
Unless
Yeah,
there's
we have one scheduled for next year,
annual
but
meeting.
I'm not aware that in the context of this transaction, that there would be a need to meet again.
Okay,
I believe so.
We've formally have to have another vote.
Any other questions? Tim, I had to step out for a minute, but thank you very much for putting this together, and thank you to everybody from the county for their cooperation and quick action too. Okay,
Oh, there's no problems.
all right, number 7, Howland Solar, excuse me, LLC. Consent to assignment.
So we've discussed this peripherally a little bit already, but Howland Solar, together with a number of other solar farms, acquired membership interest in Howland Solar LLC, specifically a company called FFP Fund 2 Partnership 1 LLC, which through this organizational chart rolls up to this other company of Gondola Solar Energy LLC through various holding companies that they own 100% of. So it's just a complex org chart. The transaction, as has happened in the past, that it happened on June 14th, so the ownership has already changed. They called into the office, actually before we even received this letter I'm looking at right here, to make sure that they understood the terms of the pilot agreement and the payments and the payment schedule, which was useful, and I appreciated them calling, but we discovered on that, obviously discovered on that call that we're talking to new owners and this has to be fixed if the board's willing to do so. So the deal's already been done, they own it, it's running, it's connected to the grid. They're in good, they haven't, under new ownership, they haven't made a pilot payment yet. The 2021 payment was made under the old ownership, but like we just been discussing through, they've asked the board to consent to consent in arrears, I guess, to the change of membership, the ownership or the ownership of the membership interest. So that's what we're up to. The terms of the pilot would stay the same. Kevin, we could probably use this one to make sure that a bond or plan or something, whatever was originally in place, is still in place.
So the entity itself is still the same entity?
Yes,
Just the ownership of that entity is changed.
The original
The mix of ownership.
The original owners of it was Cypress Creek out of California.
Okay.
Would you guys like some coffee?
I just got some things.
So good. Get a hold of them.
Thank you.
Where's this Nautilus Solar out of?
They are out of, New Jersey, yeah. Okay.
I would think, Kevin, in general, when you have a transaction like this, it shouldn't void any of the requirements of any contract that they've signed, right? I mean, I would think that they would be required by that first contract to make sure they still have satisfied all of that. Is it just that we're not, without double checking, we're not verifying it hasn't fallen off?
That's right, Tim. That's the concern, is just to make sure that,
Okay.
that everything is, carries over, is consistent, nothing has fallen off, primarily is decommissioning.
Gary?
I'm good, thank you.
But we'll make sure in this case and going forward that we have, written proof of that, or at least a representation made that they've done it.
Yeah, because you can imagine if 7, 8 years from now or 12 years from now, when these things start, our towns and villages are going to be pretty upset with us if they go to hold somebody accountable and there's some administrative thing that lets them out, and we've all along not realized it. Boy, that would be an ugly situation. So I agree with you though that they would bear some responsibility, but knowing some of my towns and some of the other ones, yeah, it may be a tall order to expect them to have stayed on top of these things, and I think they are expecting us, and I think we've kind of presented as such that we would be the ones to look over it. So I appreciate any effort you guys put into finding out that piece.
So if you were to vote no on this, then they've already done it.
Well, that's an interesting question. I haven't really fully considered that. It may be a vote, if we won't transfer this, they're basically in violation of their pilot, they're in breach of their agreement right now, because they transferred without our consent. The prior owners did. These folks bought it without our consent also. We've seen the exact same before, but, so we'd be in breach, and we're not, the way to resolve that breach would be for us to consent. If we're not willing to consent, I guess we'd have to look at it, but it may be a path towards something else.
Technically it results in a termination. We vote to terminate the pilot. The language does say that consent shall not be unreasonably withheld. So the question is,
what's reasonable if someone before they asked, because it seems like an easy way to do it, sell it and then bring it
Could
here and
force us to
you can't do anything.
Was it ask for forgiveness and?
Yeah.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I still think we still have the upper hand because if they don't meet the decommissioning bond, that's reasonable. They're not.
Sure. I mean, if you really if you wanted to come down hard, you could say just that. No, we're not approving it because you jumped the gun on us. And then
That's a question of reasonable or not.
The other matter is this was the first approved solar pilot.
Yeah.
So
I don't remember what it's 1,500 per megawatt.
I have it right here.
more than that, maybe 22,000,
2,500?
What are we're looking
that brings up a good question. Is can we as a requirement for them to sell it? Can we hold them to the current requirements? Is that even legal? I mean, could we look to do that?
Well, I mean, I
No,
think
we're under
in the context of, if it's a breach of the agreement, right? So then theoretically all terms are open to renegotiation. But, I don't
I'm
know.
not saying we should do, I just have people stop doing this. If we said, look at,
No, but it is interesting.
send us a bond and we'll vote on it next month.
Right.
So this is $3,250 per megawatt. It's a 20-year pilot, Sandy Creek School District, 2% escalator. But it was long before we had the policy about the decommissioning plans or bonds.
They may not have it.
They don't know. We don't just don't.
We-
There may not be one on this.
We may not have known
We
it.
use NYSERDA's recommendation. That's where the 3,500.
That's where the number
At the
came
time,
from.
yeah.
Have we asked them for a decommissioning bond on this project at all?
That I don't know. I'll
I thought even from the get-go, we always had the decommissioning, because remember, that was a big stink even before we got into these heavy things, everybody was asking those questions. So I'd be surprised if we don't have something in there. And I'd be surprised if the town board either. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think the first few with it, we did, Tim. I don't think we had those requirements in place.
We didn't
You
push
know,
it.
we put a policy
Okay.
together after we had a few of them. We realized we were gonna get a lot more requests, so we figured we better have a policy in place so we can be consistent with all solar farms and not just kind of arbitrarily saying, you're gonna get this and you're gonna get that.
Right.
So there may not be any bond on this one.
Yeah, the
anyway.
town may require, or the village may require it, but if we don't, we'll have to
Yeah,
check.
because we did discuss it with the village, we did talk about that to the
I think we
village.
asked
Yeah, the
before
village
we
to do it.
did it, that
Well,
there was one put in place.
Yeah. I
But,
mean-
you know,
yeah,
it doesn't hurt to make sure and
well,
Have
yeah,
to-
my feeling is that I would prove this with decommissioning bond.
There may not have been one required in the contract.
Yeah, I know, but it does, my feeling is that they come to us and they change ownership, things change.
I don't think that's.
And on top of that, I agree with Len, on top of that, they didn't get permission to do it in advance. So if anything, now would be the perfect time to say, I mean, maybe we don't go to the higher price, but I think we absolutely could require the bond. I think that's more than reasonable.
Yeah,
proof of,
leave everything else the same, we're not gonna go that route, but at this point, but decommissioning bond, yes.
Because the county itself is getting into when they cover a landfill system in these events too. Solar farms on top of them.
okay, so, as far as Howland Solar LLC consent for assignment, do I have a motion, please?
I'll move it with the stipulation of a decommissioning bond.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second? I'll
I'll second that.
Okay, Tim, thank you. Okay, motion by Len Schick, seconded by Tim Stahl. The consent to assignment for Howland Solar LLC, a contingent on a current decommissioning bond. Any questions or further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Carried. Kevin, maybe, and again, you know your job 1,000 times better than I do. Is there something in the documents when we do the closing or whatever that says before a transfer of ownership can take place? You know, so we don't run into this where they've already done it and come back, that yet they sign to say it's okay, they have to notify us in advance.
Yep, every pilot agreement that I've ever prepared since 2003
Mm-hmm.
has that language in it.
Okay,
Everyone, without exception. But in the context of the solar, we see this, it's part of the business model, right? So I think calling it out in even greater kind of detail or highlight and incorporating some of those other terms is probably appropriate. So I'm kind of imagining that we will have a solar pilot template agreement, right, that will incorporate those terms, you know, and really highlight them, maybe even put them in bold.
perfect.
You know, I don't know what more we can do
Mhm.
beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, if Howland gives us any kickback, I would say, look, we have a right to go to our current policy.
Yeah, and
I'm not sure I'm not saying we wanna do it, but.
no, I agree
But
100%.
they wanna-
It's not as bad as I thought. I was thinking it was more like 2,000 or so in that first one, but it's 30.
Yeah, I thought it was too low, that first one was.
I would actually be surprised if there wasn't a decommissioning bond that was required by the municipality. I just don't.
It would be
recall.
nice.
That's
yeah.
a small one too. I think it's only 2. What is that? 2 megawatts? I think it's
Yeah,
just
it's
2.
Yeah, it's a smaller one.
Okay,
So you can have that something, whatever, drafted for us for the next meeting, just to review.
Sure. Yeah, I can.
No, remember these bonds aren't, we're not a party to these bonds, we're not a payee, we're not, you know, it's between the solar developer and the town. We just make sure at closing that that's in place and the town has signed off on it. It's like a due diligence checklist, so we're requiring that it's in place, but we're not a party to it, so I don't know if our contract can, I mean, it could require that, but there's only so much we can control, because we're not negotiating that bond with the solar developer, the town is. As long as it meets the town's approval, we accept
Yeah,
it.
the only thing that our agreement would say is that that they present us proof of
Yeah.
decommission. We don't really care about the terms, that's between the municipality and the company,
That's
but we just wanna see proof of it.
Or proof that the town decided not to do anything.
Well, I suppose, yeah, that,
Yeah, we haven't seen that yet.
that would be pretty
Except maybe
stupid.
the early one, yeah, maybe this one they didn't have in any of this, yeah. So,
but you know, that one too, the Holland Solar, just from a personal perspective, I mean, John Holland is the owner of the property, he's the zoning officer up in Sandy Creek and Pulaski area, and he leased that to the company, so he still owns the land, it's just by way of a lease, so I have to imagine that he probably insisted on a decommissioning bond, you know, for his
I
own,
hope so,
for
yeah,
his own
sure,
safety and
Yeah.
use, but we'll find out.
Good,
Okay.
thank you.
sounds good.
Okay, Michael, I was gonna jump down to number 12 and 13, since they're not under executive session. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, so number 12, annual report fiscal year ending.
Well, everybody was sent the annual report, so I'm not going to get well on going over it. Because Lance going to kick me under the table. But this is the report that we put together every year. It goes on the website. It says it's approved.
Oh, you make that.
It's also part of the Paris report. There's components in this. It is the information that is requested or demanded in the Paris report. So it's ready to rock and roll if you want to approve it, and we will have it put on the website.
Now Tully's, they put a paint job on, do you want it?
No, I like the gravel. I like the pile of dirt or whatever it is in the front. That
Yeah,
gives it.
I didn't notice that, yeah.
That gives it real character.
I've driven that way, I've never even noticed to look at it, to see what it looks like now.
It's starting to, you
It
know.
don't look too much different.
It doesn't
It's
look too
friendly.
much.
Except they got some of the road in the back done. So
Okay, so I guess a motion on accepting the annual report fiscal year ending July 31st, 2021.
I'll move it.
Okay, motion by Lynn Schick, seconded.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Morris Sabello. Any other questions or comments? Mike, is this sent to everyone, legislators, everyone?
yeah, it's at the not upcoming EDP committee, but the one following that, it will be presented to the EDP. But it's also sent to all the county legislators.
Okay, thank you.
And then there's a link that's put on the Operation Oswego County newsletter that goes out to everyone, you know, in Graham. So.
Tim, did you have some comment you were gonna ask?
I was going to ask you if Mike would be willing, and again, I want to thank him for sending that out, the physical copies, and, obviously making it available online. Just for the purposes of, this is being recorded, is there maybe just the opportunity just to point out a couple highlights that Mike would highlight? Obviously, it was another difficult year, but there were some good wins in there too. Is there anything, Mike, just so maybe want to give just a little quick plug for some of the projects that were able to be accomplished over the last year?
Well, there's, I forgot what page it's on, is a list of all the projects that the agency was involved. On page 10 is the list of projects in which the agency either funded or closed on a straight lease transaction or approved. It's a pretty good list. It's about $74 million worth of total project cost. Pretty low on jobs because again, a lot of this was COVID impacted. 152 new jobs and 62 retained jobs. The biggest project, one of the bigger ones, was Tailwater Lodge. Now their project that is the one that we approved during this fiscal year, that project has been put on hold, primarily because of cost of materials. So they have decided to put the brakes on it. They also have an application in for CFA, some CFA funding for that project too, and they're probably waiting to see if they're going to get approved for that, which I anticipate that they will. So that's been delayed, but it should start back up pretty soon. And we'll not terminated, just delayed. Bunch of these things are solar projects. I mean, there's a whole slew of solar projects. Of course, Tully's one of the projects that are in this group. The rooftop at the Latadro was a project, and All Source, which I kind of like, All Source Fire Supply was one that we helped to fund with an MEP micro loan over in Hastings, woman-owned business. And the biggie was the DePaul project in the city of Oswego, which is close to a $20 million housing project. And so overall, I think it was a pretty good year. But you can see type energy is all over the place, and those are solar projects, which don't create any jobs. So there's a few construction jobs.
I mean, I would say, Tim, particularly if you're talking to your colleagues, you look at the bottom line numbers, the amount of financial assistance, $8.7 million, and that resulted in total project costs of just shy of $75 million. So we turned that $8.7 million in public financial assistance into $75 million worth of public-private investment, right? That's a pretty good takeaway.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would do is, and I apologize, Mike, I can't remember from the top of my head, and I don't have it right here in front of me if I have access to it, but there's been a lot of discussion, renewed discussion about the Economic Development Strategic Plan that we partnered with years ago. I know there's notes to that in the annual report, but if there, and again, I apologize if it's already there for not knowing this off my head, but is there a way, if we don't already, to kind of include a summary of how we move that forward in the previous year, if that makes sense?
I don't know what you're getting at.
Well, just like more specifically to draw back onto the accomplishments as they relate to what we've talked about in the actual development plan. So, we've talked a little bit kind of how a lot of what we do in the IDA and operations through the county as well are driven by that plan and are moving that plan forward, even as we've talked about over the last year, more like a one-page splash page of things that were highlighted in the plan that have been accomplished, if that makes sense.
Or working towards accomplishing.
Well, I mean, there could be. I would prefer doing that separately and not including it in this report per se, because this is addressing the things that the parish report addresses. But I mean, energy is one of the focuses of the targeted industry group in the advancement plan. I mean, all that can be quantified. Tourism is another sector that's in there. Manufacturing is a sector that's also listed in here. Some of the some of the investments in real estate that the agency did relative to buying that property and expanding the industrial park and the Schuylkill. I mean, all of that stuff can be summarized.
12 of the 22 towns projects are located in the city of Oswego. Bolton isn't on that list, but presumably would be next year with with the DRI projects. But so more than half of the municipalities were had a project funded in it.
And also one of the main points too of the economic plan was intermunicipal, governmental intermunicipal cooperation. We've worked with the county and worked with local governments to help fund projects, feasibility studies, and other things. So hopefully we can take care of some of the issues as far as wastewater conveyance and other things that is going to help benefit the county.
Yep, again, thank you very much for all that information. I just was, thought it might be helpful to have that on like a one-page splash page. It's not for the parish report, annual report. If there's a separate annual report, we've always, I believe, Mike, we've always used that parish report, annual report as kind of your annual report to us as well. So, you know, if there's a separate one, that would make some sense. But just it would be nice to have that, I think, to have access to that as we are returning to a discussion about that plan.
Just go a little deeper, huh, Tim?
Yeah,
Or summarize it a little more succinctly, that's all.
because the expansion of the industrial park is in the listing of things on page 13. In terms of the acreage that was acquired for that project. So, okay, now we can put together a kind of little summary page tying IDA activities, but there's also activities with Operation Oswego County that applies to that as well.
Well, one of the things I think Tim
Yeah.
is trying,
Some of the moves we're doing going forward here, I don't know if you all saw, and I could do it in the new business piece, but Dave Turner is applying for a grant that could potentially provide additional monies for brownfield spaces that I think have a nice overlap with some of the properties that the IDA currently owns. And so there are, I think, some other possibilities here for the future that we've talked about. I think it'd be nice to be able to, I don't want to say get credit for it, but at least to be able to present, not only that we are on top of the economic development plan that the county and we put together, but also that we've got a plan going forward to kind of target some of those specific bullet points that plan put together.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I think it's a good idea.
well, a lot of projects sometimes aren't noticed necessarily in the paper and what have you. And I just want to bring forth that there's projects taking place around us, the county airport, for example. There's other things that are going on that take place here that help create activity for our organization, that's all. I mean, we got two places in Fulton there that are Addison, now the other property, they're sitting there, people just wonder what goes on. So
It makes sense to do what Tim's saying, I think, to
Yeah.
highlight how we're helping advance the economic advancement plan and our contribution to it and Operation Oswego counties as well. And highlight for the legislators that these organizations are in this county and moving this ball forward and not, there's no need to rely on outsiders to do it for us.
Mhm. Definitely. Okay, Tim?
Yeah, sounds great, thanks.
Okay. Okay, so we got the motion in the second, we voted on the annual report, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, moving to 13, Lakeside Commons?
We moved the annual report. Oh, land water.
Cut you short, I'm in an IDA meeting right now.
So Lakeside Commons,
Bye, bye.
if we recall at the last meeting, we granted our consent to the sale of so Lakeside Commons is the student housing, townhouses kind of just west of SUNY Oswego, privately owned, but bordering the campus right along 104. So we approved the sale. Now it's related to that same transaction that we've already approved. The buyer is looking to refinance the project. Why exactly this wasn't included in the sale approval, I couldn't really say. But basically, based on our documents, we need to consent to the financing. We won't be a party to the bank documents in this case, so typically when there's a mortgage, we would be, because we're in the chain of title with the lease, we'd have to sign off on those agreements. We would not have to do that in this case, which tells me it's not I don't know the details of the financing, to be honest. It's a big number, but which I won't say right now, but it's apparently not a mortgage. It must be some other type of financing vehicle. So, we're in it's a very big facility, so it's a lot of money. We could discuss it in executive session, but in any event, they need our consent to agree to the financing change.
So the motion would be to just consent.
Yeah,
Allow them-
it's an actual resolution, and it's a little odd that we're doing this in 2 steps rather than all at once. So again, I'm not exactly sure why that is, but this is something we have to do. So the resolution says it's a type 2 action, which means that there is no secret required, no environmental impacts, obviously just a refinancing, and that we're basically consenting to the transaction, which is the refinancing, and that we're authorizing the
Haven't
signing.
you done
of
other
documents.
things with them already since the initial project?
Well, just last month, we agreed to consent to similar to what we just did with Howland,
Okay,
consent to the assignment of the membership interest to a new company.
okay, and then,
It's gonna remain the same, it's Lakeside Commons, it's just new ownership, new management. Or not new management.
Yeah.
Management company is gonna remain, but the owners.
right, that's, I remember, yeah, but, yeah,
We
okay.
consented to that, but for whatever reason, there was language missing in that last resolution related to the consent to the financing, because the
Oh,
change.
okay, all right.
That was kind of uncovered through the whole legal process of reviewing.
Okay, all right, so this is just a basic follow-up to last.
Yeah,
time.
it's really the second
Consent.
part of
It's a
that.
cleanup.
Change, okay,
More than
all right,
anything, I
okay.
guess, just-
Yeah.
If it's not a mortgage, then why do we need to be involved in it at all, honestly?
Well, they are, because it is a transfer of the membership interest. So it's technically, our consent is required, but it's
So
not.
whoever they're
to
borrowing
get
the money
consent.
from is taking is gonna have some type of a lien on the property.
Yeah,
Perhaps,
yeah, I mean, we're.
Not
and
necessarily as a mortgage, but.
As Kevin said, we're still in title, so we are, our consent is required, and the financing folks wanna see that that's been done, and I don't think that they were completely convinced that the last action that was taken got them to the point where they realized that, the financing part of this was appropriate, so it's, like I said, it's more of a cleanup than anything else.
And they hope to close this, I think, before the end of the year. if
They're-
recall.
I mean,
Yeah, it's
I-
moving, so.
Maybe, yeah, if not the end of this month.
Yeah.
I mean,
See any reason why for us
no,
not to?
none whatsoever.
I'll move the
Okay, a
motion.
motion by Nick Canali, seconded by
I'll second.
Barry Trimble. Any questions, comments? No, everything, the
Yeah,
terms and everything.
If I could, Kevin, so it does sound, I'm confused at, like you said, why are 2 separate steps? Why have we done this? The previous one, if I remember correctly, we didn't get too deep into the weeds at all with that one. Essentially, it was just we were okay with it. It sounds like this one is asking for some further stuff, consenting to information that we actually don't have access to. Is that correct, Kevin Lomacine?
I can't discuss the loan amounts in public session,
Oh.
but we
Okay,
have
but
access
you
to
have
whatever.
the information.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, understood.
Uh,
Do you feel
exactly
the
the
need for us to
structure.
share any of that with us? Do we need to have an executive in order to vote on this? I'm just a little uncomfortable voting to approve financial information that we've never seen. As long as you have access to it and you feel comfortable as CFO, I'm fine going based on your recommendation. But to consent to a contractual thing that we've never seen, if you're saying we don't need to, I would take your word. But it just sounds strange to me to have to come back to us. That's all.
Well, let me put it into some context. The company is going to have a mortgage. They're going to have an assignment. They're going to have security agreements. The IDA is not being asked to sign off on those, right? So it's going to be a separate transaction between the company and their financing folks. Which frankly benefits the county and the state because any mortgage taxes generated doesn't get an exemption. So, if you look at it that way, they're not concerned about having an exemption through the IDA and through the mortgage tax exemption. So, but all of the rest of the structure, the financing of it is conventional in terms of the mortgage and an assignment of rents and leases and all the rest of it. In fact, the resolution specifically says the agency will not grant financial assistance in the form of a mortgage recording tax exemption with respect to recording of the refinancing documents. But in all other respects, it's a normal transaction.
Okay, understood. I'm fine with that. Thank you.
I think the original resolution simply conferred all of the prior benefits, and we consented to it. And once the lender folks and their attorneys and the underwriters looked at it, they said, we need to clean this up because we're not asking for the IDA to exempt anything here. And so that's really what we're talking about today. I'm certainly comfortable recommending it. I think Kevin might come too as well.
Okay, any other comments or questions on the consent to refinance for Lakeside Commons? I have a motion by Nick Canale, seconded by Barry. Right, Mike?
Right.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carried. Okay, now I think we're going into executive session.
I'll make a motion to move into executive session.
Do I have a second? Second by Morris Sorbello.
10:44.
And Kevin, the reason we're going into executive session?
There's two reasons today to discuss the financial history of a particular individual or corporation, but also to discuss pending or threatened litigation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Carried. Okay.
No, then we got left to harvest this.
Okay, we're live.
Okay, motion to come out of executive session.
I'll make it.
Motion by Nick Canale, seconded by Morris Cervello. At what time, Lynn?
11:45.
11:45. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now to go back and take care of some business that we had discussed. Upward Graphics LLC, the micro enterprise loan of $25,000. Do I have a motion on the micro enterprise loan?
I'll move it.
Motion by Len Schick, seconded by
I'll second.
Nick Canale. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. The delinquent loan report of September 30th, 2021. Do I have a motion to accept the delinquent loan as reported? I'll make that. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion by Gary Toth, seconded by Nick Canale on the delinquent loan report. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. And finally, we have two loan deferment requests, one for J. Reed,
Yeah, J&E Reed Enterprises.
J&E Reed Enterprises. So do I have a motion for 6-month deferment on J&E Reed Enterprises?
I'll make that.
Motion by Nick Canale,
I'll second it.
seconded by Len Schick. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And the second one is a loan deferment for counseling and healing arts. Do I have a motion on the loan deferment for counseling and healing arts for 6-month loan deferment?
I'll make that one too.
Motion by Nick Canale, seconded by Morris Cervello. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Okay. Any other business to discuss? Okay, next meeting.
What about, latter part of November 22, 23, or 24?
22, 23, 24.
Thanksgiving week?
22 is a Monday, Tuesday. I got Monday and Tuesday wide open, so I don't hunt anymore, so that's, I'm getting ready for that.
Monday, okay?
Monday'd be better for me than Tuesday.
Okay, yeah.
How about you, Kevin?
Monday's good.
Monday good for you, Nick?
11:22.
Okay. So we have Monday,
9 o'clock.
11/22 at 9 o'clock. Good?
November 22, is that it?
Yep. 9 o'clock, next meeting. You got that, Tim?
Yep, works for me.
It works for you? Okay. All right, so the next meeting is November 22nd, Monday, November 22nd at 9 a.m. Okay. Motion to adjourn. Motion by Nick Canale, seconded by Morris Cervello. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much, and we will see you
11:49.
in November.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, take care, Tim. Take care of his son now.
Hold on, the camera's on.